Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton and CNN opinion contributor Sophia Nelson. She's a former House Republican Government Reform and Oversight Investigative Committee counsel. Shermichael, I want to start with you. And it's like I have John King sitting on my shoulder as a campaign reporter conscience telling me, just wait till they count the votes. Don't get out ahead of it. Donald Trump's way ahead in the polls in Iowa and New Hampshire. 2 weeks ago to the Iowa caucuses. Can these candidates, other candidates, not named Donald Trump, do anything between now and then to change the trajectory?
Well, Happy New Year, John. And the answer to that question is absolutely not. I think at this point, individuals who are still in this race are more than likely running to be considered a second to Trump, meaning the running mate, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis. I even think individuals such as Tim Scott, who's been very favorable in his remarks about the former president as of late, are all eyeing being his running mate. But the reality is, for Trump, I think you have to ask yourself who's going to give you some advantage with women voters and independent voters going into 2024 election. And I think the Biden administration is going to have a really difficult time trying to paint Trump only as an anti-democracy candidate if he's able to find someone who's more palatable to some of those swing voters.
And again, Sophia, John King sitting right here on my shoulder saying, don't get too out in front. Let the people vote. Let's count the votes. If you are these other candidates, what should you be doing now? What can you do, whether it be to beat Donald Trump or to position yourself going forward?
I agree with Shermichael that I think Donald Trump is too far ahead, particularly because the field hasn't consolidated enough. If DeSantis and Christie were out and it was just Haley and Trump, might be a bit of a different ballgame because then there's a stark contrast. There's still too much noise going on in this Republican primary, but I think Iowa and New Hampshire are going to fix that. I do think also that, with respect to Nikki Haley, she had a lot of momentum, John, and I think she hurt herself this past week with the gaffe on slavery, the omission, if you will, about something that was really obvious. And I think that the Biden campaign, you can kind of see this already with some of the tweets, like the president immediately hit back to Nikki Haley and wrote, it was slavery, right, when she didn't get the answer right for the question asked about the causes of the Civil War. And so I think that they're going to go after Nikki Haley and show that she's not at all a candidate that's palatable to the center or to independents. In fact, she's just as bad as Trump. And I think whatever this ticket ends up being, if it's Trump and DeSantis or Trump and Haley, although DeSantis says he's not going to run as a running mate, I think they're going to paint him as an extremist threat to democracy, campaign. And I think that's going to be what the campaign's going to be about, to be honest.
It can't be Ron DeSantis unless either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis move out of Florida, which would be an interesting trick for either one of them because of the Constitution. Shermichael, we heard Kevin Liptak on hardship assignment in St. Croix say that we can expect President Biden to hit back harder directly against Donald Trump in the coming months. What do you think the Biden campaign needs to do moving forward this year?
I mean, look, John, I think that's one component of the argument, the anti-democratic argument. I'm not convinced, however, that is enough. If I were advising the president, I would focus a lot on the economy. You guys had a segment a few blocks ago that talked about how things are improving economically. Look at the job numbers. We can expect in this new year for the Fed to decrease basis rates, which is a good thing for people who are trying to buy homes, particularly young people in my age group. I also think that the administration is doing the right thing by having the vice president crisscross the country talking about reproductive rights. If you look at how effective Democrats were down ballot, including in my state of Virginia, you saw significant victories against Republicans in races that the Republicans should have won on the question, on the issue, on the topic of abortion. And so I think focusing on those two things with a little bit of the anti-democracy talk against Trump could be an effective message for the Biden-Harris administration going into November, which will likely lead to a re-election.
Sophia Nelson, is 2024 the year that Democrats and President Biden get credit for the U.S. economy from those who see the U.S. economy as going well?
It all depends on the messaging. I think Shermichael's right. I think up to this point, it's been a big disconnect, right? When you look at the facts and the figures, the stock market higher than ever, and the president's numbers are not great. But the truth is, John, if we're telling the truth, the 800-pound elephant in the room is that nobody's excited about a Trump-Biden rematch. Let's just be honest about it. You know, these two guys, we've seen this before. Yes, President Biden has a record to run on. Donald Trump seems like he's going to have a record that he's going to have to run with. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, you're looking at the economy versus how people are going to feel about re-electing a guy with 91 counts, 4 indictments, and all kind of crazy drama every day. The tweets, the crazy Christmas tweet. Who wants to deal with 4 years of that? I was talking to people over the holidays. They're exhausted. They want Trump gone. They're over it. So we're going to see.
I mean,
And
John,
Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, I mean, if you look at the electoral results from Democrats down ballot in 2023, if those numbers are to be believed that significant turnout will maintain in November of this year, I find it hard to believe that President Biden won't get reelected. Despite what the polls are currently saying, I think that momentum is likely to remain.
Yeah, I think he gets reelected as well, and I think that it's because people aren't going to vote for Crazy Town for president again. They're just not going to do it. I have faith in us, America. That's what I think is going to happen.
It'll be interesting to see. What Shermichael calls momentum, I think, is something that absolutely Democrats in the White House would like to claim that mantle. I'm not sure they feel like there's been much momentum just yet. Shermichael Singleton, Sophia Nelson, Happy New Year to both of you.
Happy New Year, John.
Happy New Year, John. Thank you.